Cyprus Policy Center with our department, International Relations and Political Science. Today I am happy to be the moderator for our director and also our chair of our department, as you know. So before we begin our seminar, I would like to give you a brief information on who our professor is. So Ahmet Sözen, he is a professor of political science with conflict resolution and peace building as his main areas of expertise. He was recently a guest professor in the unit of peace and conflict studies at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. His experience over the last 3 decades includes participating in peace negotiations from the first track in Cyprus as a member of the official Turkish Cypriot negotiation team in the UN-led peace negotiations and active involvement in second track peace initiatives. Ahmet Sözen has been a policy expert of the Diplomats Association for Mediterranean Diplomacy from its inception. This is an organization that brings conflict resolution experts from the Mediterranean countries together to contribute to solution of the conflicts in the region. As diplomats, they have produced numerous policy papers on the solutions of issues in the region. One of the most notable publications Sözen played a major role as the coordinator, co-editor, and chapter contributor is Conflict Resolution in the Mediterranean, Energy as a Potential Game Changer. He has been a member of EMI, Eastern Mediterranean Initiative, from its inception. EMI brings together experts from the Eastern Mediterranean region to work on solving the conflicts in the Eastern Mediterranean. Currently, GCSP, Geneva Center for Security Policy, and Swiss Peace host EMI together. Since 2005, Sözen has been a member of the Cyprus chapter within the Greek-Turkish Forum, another Track 2 initiative that is supported by Greek and Turkish foreign ministries. GTF brings together academics and retired diplomats who work on contributing to peace and stability between Greece and Turkey, as well as contributing to the solution of peace in Cyprus. Sözen guest edited a special issue book called Track 2 Diplomacy, The Way Out in the Eastern Mediterranean, The Solution is in Diplomacy for Europolitical Journal, which was published in May 2024. So without further ado, I would like to give my professor the space to give us the seminar.
Thank you, Hatice, and a very warm welcome to everybody to this seminar today. It gives me great pleasure always to host, but at the same time, from time to time, maybe in every few years, to be able to present. What I'm going to present today is basically a paper that I wrote for the International Studies Association annual meeting, which I presented in Chicago last month. But different from that, which was only 12 minutes, because that's the space and the time you are given in an international conference. We have, of course, more than that time today, where I will try my best to also tell you about how I got engaged with the so-called Track 2 on a conceptual level as a student and then as a professor. And also I will try to evaluate 3 Track 2 initiatives that I have been personally engaged with the last 20 years. So I'll be also giving you some real life knowledge as well as expertise on those. So let's start with the basics. What is Track 2? Diplomacy. How is it different from Track 1? When did this concept got into life? Well, in 1981, a US Department of State employee by the name Joseph Montefiore coined the term Track 2, basically saying that Track 2 diplomacy is all the processes, all the activities which happens outside of Track 1. What is Track 1? Track 1 is traditional diplomacy, state to state, government to governments, basically what diplomats who represent their own countries engage with. Those are track 1 domain. And anything that happens outside of that, regarded as track 2. Why he came up with this terminology? Because he came to realize that government-to-government interactions were not necessarily the most effective methods in solving a lot of modern conflicts that we are faced with, ranging from climate crisis to engaging with terrorists. There is a cliche in track 1 mostly that governments do not negotiate with terrorists. Well, true or false? But track 2 also gives you a space where you can also get the controversial people into the room where they can also give their positions and you get engaged in a space where you try to solve outstanding problems. Anyways, moving on. What is track 2? In a nutshell, unofficial diplomatic initiatives outside formal government channels. They create platforms for dialogue between adversarial groups. It is used when official relations are limited or non-existent. What happens, for example, you have two actors who are in conflict, but nonetheless they don't talk to one another. Not that they don't want to talk to one another, sometimes that's the case, that they don't have the legal, let's say, basis to talk to one another. For example, take two actors, Israel, Lebanon. They don't recognize one another. They don't talk to one another. But they have a huge problem, right? So how do you solve the problem between, for example, Israel and Lebanon? All right? Other cases. Even in Cyprus, we had similar problem. Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. The two leadership, for example, they don't talk to one another directly. In all these years, the negotiations took place under the auspices, the UN hosting it. If the UN is not there, a Greek Cypriot president is not going to talk to a Turkish Cypriot president. The leaders. All right, so how do you deal with problems when the adversaries, when the parties in conflict do not have the channels to talk to one another? It is there that track 2 becomes very useful. Now, where is this track 2 thing coming from? I've briefly elaborated. When we came to the 1990s, this concept, track 2, got expanded, or how shall I put it in a politically correct way? It was enhanced, it was elaborated further, it was expanded further to other tracks by two important scholars. One was Louis Diamond, who trained me too in Cyprus back in the 90s, as well as Ambassador John MacDonald, who coined the term multi-track diplomacy. This was in the 90s. I had the chance to also meet him personally, Ambassador MacDonald, before he died. We served on the same panel. We exchanged letters in the 90s when I was a PhD student, by the way. And he sent me a copy of his book, which I still keep in my office. So my engagement with track 2 and multi-track diplomacy dates back to a long time, I would say. All right, now, back to multi-track diplomacy. Basically, track 1, you know, governments to governments on the leaders to leaders level. Then on track 2, you have the professional conflict resolution experts. Right? This is the area for track 2. Here, they expanded this to include business, how you can utilize business people, like joint ventures. Track 4, private citizens, citizen-to-citizen diplomacy, how you can get private citizens to interact. Track 5, how you utilize research and training, education, how you use education as another track to help solving conflicts. Track 6, peace activism, how you can get engaged peace activism. Track 7, interestingly, how you can use religion as another domain to contribute to peace building and reconciliation in a conflict situation. Track 8, funding, how you can raise funding for the purpose of peace building and whatnot. And in the middle is track 9, which is media. And when we say media, back in the 90s, we meant traditional mainstream media. Newspapers, TV, radios, not the social media. But today, it is richer because you have the new media or the social media, which is also included there. So, you got the basic idea, right? Today, I'm going to focus on track 2. But before doing that, let me also show you a taste of what I did in the 90s, where I evaluated the state of peace or the state of peace building in Cyprus on 9 different levels or 9 different tracks, just to show you some pictures here. You recognize these guys, or at least some of you. The Greek Cypriot leader, the Turkish Cypriot leader. The US vice president at that time. Later became President Biden, who was in Nicosia, in the UN buffer zone, in Litra Palace Hotel, which brought the two sides together. This is classic track 1. That picture gives you a taste of classic track 1. This is track 3, business. At some point in Cyprus, we had the heads of chambers of commerces of Greece, Turkey, Greek Cypriot side, Turkish Cypriot side. All right, all coming together and trying to venture joint stuff that would have helped a lot. Anyways, so that's track 3. And this is very interesting, which is also happening in Cyprus. The religious track, track 7. It's been, if I remember correctly, almost 20 years, maybe 19 years, that we have religious leaders in Cyprus on both sides. You have the Orthodox Church, you have the Islamic Affairs in the north, the Office of Religious Affairs in the north, as well as you have the Armenian Church, the Maronite Church, as well as the Catholics came together. All right? So this is the picture. Very interesting. So there is a dialogue going on in Cyprus on the religious track too, which helps in smoothing things out. Though from time to time we have the Archbishop sort of as a potential spoiler giving his very national narrative, but nonetheless, at least there is a dialogue process there. Okay, back to track 2. Usually I said it brings together people who are usually conflict resolution experts. These could be academics. This could be some think tank people, and mostly, a lot of times, retired diplomats. Why retired diplomats? Because if they are not retired, they would be track one. When they retire, they don't represent their respective governments. And that's the key, that they are in the room in their personal capacity, not representing anybody. All right? So that's usually the case. It helps address complex regional problems, provides creative solutions when track one diplomacy fails, builds trust between the opposing parties, and it supplements track one, meaning that it doesn't replace track one. We have to emphasize this, that track two diplomacy is not a panacea. You know what a panacea is? A very good term. Anybody who took a course from me knows this word. Cure for all. It's very good, it's very helpful, but it's not the solution itself. If there will be an agreement at the end, it's not track two who can make it possible. It can maybe help provide the text, but at the same time, you need track one to sign. Any kind of formal agreement needed the support and the blessings of track one. Okay? So in that sense, track two is a good supplement to track one. All right? Its key features, it's informal, it's flexible, it focuses on the relationship over formal agreements, it uses neutral facilitators, and as well as it creates safe spaces for open dialogue. All right? Core objectives: resolve conflicts through dialogue, build confidence between parties, generate innovative policy solutions, creative policy solutions, and foster grassroots engagement. All right? So there are a lot of strengths of track two. But at the same time, we have to be also aware of its limitations. Okay. You might say, so what? You bring a bunch of people, like Ahmed Sözen or some retired diplomat, into a room. So what? What do these people do in that room which is behind closed doors, which media doesn't know and nobody reports? These guys might come up with the best solution maybe. So what? You might say. They might find the best solution to a specific problem, be it the Cyprus problem, be it the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Yeah, a lot of blueprints were produced so far in track two. So what? Well, it has limited direct influence on policy. You have to admit that. If you cannot get the attention of track one, if you cannot transmit the messages, the solutions that you actually cook in track two, it doesn't have any impact. So you need to buy in of track one. You need to somehow influence track one in order for you to make an impact. It does require some resources. You cannot just bring people from different parts of the world free. So you need a sponsor. sometimes to buy the plane tickets, accommodation, the venue, and whatnot. And then also it brings the problem of, will you be able to find a sponsor who is going to let you do what you want? Will the sponsor be neutral and not biased? All right? So there are a lot of considerations there. So I have to admit that more than its strengths, I have to tell you that it also has limitations. Risk of manipulation by governments. If your initiative is known in an uncontrolled way, sometimes the governments might use it to manipulate. The government might say, oh, these bunch of eccentric radicals are coming together. Don't pay them any attention. These are traitors, within quotation marks. All right? So there is also the risk of that. All right? And if you are too, how shall I put it? If this initiative, let's say, is out there with a lot of claims, unrealistic claims, you can actually create some unrealistic expectations, which will bring you the failure in a more dramatic way. So, knowing also the limitations of these, I'm going to try to move into 3 examples of track 2 diplomacy that I have been personally engaged. One is Greek-Turkish Forum. The Greek-Turkish Forum was established in 1997 after so many tense events that took place between Turkey and Greece, which in fact brought the 2 countries to the brink of war in the Aegean Sea. The 2 countries in mid-90s, they came to the brink of war due to some rocks, meaning to which country those rocks in the Aegean belonged to. So it was a sovereignty issue. But nonetheless, there was a forum established which included retired diplomats, retired military, high-ranking officers, and some academics. This forum is directly financed by Turkish and Greek foreign ministries, by the way. So this is different in the sense that this is not a straight track 2, but this is what we call track 1.5. Another interesting terminology. Track 1.5, how is it different from track 2? Well, track 1.5 has a stronger link with track 1. Although these people are retired, nonetheless that they are very much linked to their current foreign ministries. So that ideas, solutions, policy recommendations produced in track 2 in their meetings can be conveyed to track 1 in a much more easier way. You got my point? Track 1.5. All right? So, in 2006, my God, almost 20 years ago, Greek-Turkish Forum established a Cyprus chapter that also included some Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot participants, and I was one of them in 2006. So, what do they do? If you go to their website, you can actually, and I'm not going to show you here, but you can get a lot of ideas. I'm going to leave the evaluation to the last. The other track 2 initiative that I've been part of, I can tell you these because these are public now, by the way. But there are some other track 2 initiatives that I'm a member of, which I don't disclose here because they are not public yet. the dialogue started in early 2000s, virtually. It was during Corona, the pandemic, but it became a full-fledged regional dialogue initiative in 2023. This is basically sponsored by the Swiss government, Swiss Foreign Ministry, it started as Geneva Center for Security Policy, GCSP, which is a known think tank in Switzerland. And the last 1 year, Swiss Peace, which is another influential Swiss organization, also co-host us, the Eastern Mediterranean Initiative, which brought people from the Eastern Mediterranean region, including Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan. So all these countries which have their links to Eastern Mediterranean, and we are hoping that not in the distant future we'll have more participants from Palestinians as well as Syrians, because Syria is also within Eastern Mediterranean, but due to the problems in Syria, we didn't have any Syrian participants. What we do is that 3 times a year we come together, mostly in a different Swiss town. If you go to the website of GCSP or Swiss Peace, you will be able to find some policy papers that we have written about the need for a regional dialogue in this region in terms of solving the problems, including energy-related, security-related, as well as environment-related. This is also a mixed group that includes prominent academics, think tank people, and retired diplomats. It's different in the sense, to the first one, that it's the Swiss government which plays a pivotal role here in terms of also carrying the ideas, policy recommendations, solutions to different governments in the region. All right? So that's the idea. And finally, another Track 2 initiative, which is purely Track 2, which I have been very proud of, is Diplomats, which is the Council for Mediterranean Diplomacy. It brings conflict resolution related experts, again, mostly academics, retired diplomats from the Mediterranean countries, from the Mediterranean region. All the countries that I've mentioned in EMI, plus. So we also have in this group Italians, French, and people from other Mediterranean countries, Spain, and whatnot. So including to Israelis, Palestinians, Cypriots, Turks, Greeks, and whatnot. This is all, in a way, what do you call that? On a voluntary basis. We do not get anything paid. This is what I'm saying is a pro bono work that people do, just like the others. I'm not getting paid, by the way, so don't get me wrong. I'm not getting paid any money due to my participation to any one of these, so don't get me wrong. So this is basically voluntary basis to help contribute to the solution of the problems in the region, in the Mediterranean region. Now, this has been going on for the last 3 years, diplomats. And when I do a kind of evaluation, and this is what I did in the paper for the ISA that I presented in Chicago. I evaluated these three initiatives based on their engagement, how widespread their engagement are, their output, what they produce, and their policy impact. Of course, this is not very objective, but I tried my best. This is just an example that I did for diplomats. I said, diplomats brings together prominent academics, retired state officials, diplomats, and strong NGO representatives and policy experts with conflict resolution expertise, experience, who are coming from the Mediterranean region. Diplomats works as a track to dialogue group, which is further divided into thematic dialogue groups. Thematic could be about Gaza Marine, could be about Israel, Lebanon. It could be about normalization of relations between Turkey and Egypt, Turkey and Israel. You get the point. All these different thematic issues in the region. They meet very frequently in virtual reality, Zoom, Teams, whatever. They also meet in person, mostly as smaller focus groups in different countries. The meetings are, in many cases, conducted based on Chatham House rules. Are you familiar with this terminology, Chatham House rules? What does that mean, Chatham House rules? Yeah, you keep the anonymity. You can use the ideas produced there, but you cannot ascribe to it any names. You don't mention the names of the participants. This is called Chatham House rules, all right? Now, outputs, there are policy papers that they produce. Diplomats frequently hold private briefings of Track 1 in terms of private road shows, policy briefings, some virtually, some in person, such as bringing UN, EU institutions, and diplomatic missions. So diplomats has a very, very close interaction with Track 1. Different levels, ambassadorial levels, EU officials, UN officials in different levels. So usually the ideas of diplomats are shared with these people in different formats. What else? Diplomats also produce unpublished blueprints for the settlement of some conflicts in the Mediterranean region, and due to sensitivities, those are not put on their website. They are not public. They are usually, and that's the beauty of Track 2, to produce ideas catered for Track 1 usage. All right? Policy impact. Now, some observations based on, I am probably quite subjective in that sense, but as somebody who's been participating into these three platforms, I find the Greek-Turkish Forum having a somewhat limited policy impact. It's due to the fact that GTF, Greek-Turkish Forum, does not produce, it usually produces joint statements. And when we say joint statements, that means that all the participants, and let's say in a meeting if we are 15 or 20 people, about 14, 15 Greeks and Turks, retired diplomats and whatnot, and several Cypriots, it's very difficult to get a joint statement. Why? Why is it so different? Very difficult.
Because of the conflicting.
You need a consensus. So even some of the words that you use, and since I said GTF is more like a track 1.5, people are close to their own foreign ministries, it's very difficult to produce something that would be very opposite to their national discourse. So in that sense, yes, we do produce joint statements, but it doesn't have much of an impact. If you are also taking course from Erol Kaymak, another instructor, he has been a member of the Greek-Turkish Forum. He is one of the coordinators of the Cyprus chapter. Ask him too. He might give you another, let's say, version on this. But I find our impact very limited. I have to be honest. Now, EMI, the Swiss-sponsored track 2, it is somewhat more impactful compared to GTF, because at the end of the day, I don't know what the Swiss government says to a Israeli or a Turkish or a Greek or a Cypriot official when they bring our product, the policy recommendations we produce. I don't know their impact, but I presume that with such engagement with track 1, compared to GTF, they might have somewhat more policy impact. Diplomats, in that sense, is my favorite here. I have to, my colleagues in GTF and EMI might sort of be angry with me, but I have to be honest. I think diplomats has more policy impact in that sense. So, in a nutshell, these are what we are doing. I also give some policy recommendations to each one of them in this paper. But a couple of points before I stop, and then maybe you can ask more specific questions. What are some of the success factors of track 2 diplomacy? Well, number one, the choosing of the participants. Who will be leading the track 2 process? The participants need to be credible people. All right? You have to have clear communication channels, facilitation and whatnot should be there. And if you want that track 2 initiative to be successful, like it or not, it should have some connection to the formal process. Meaning it should have some sort of connection to track 1. Otherwise, we can just sit down with the best of the minds and we can produce the best, let's say, blueprint for any solution. But at the end of the day, if there is no buyer from track 1, what do? You drink a carbonated water and go back home, as we say, to digest. All right? And the other important success factor from my observation is that it should have a sustained engagement. All right? I mean, sometimes you just meet once, you have one shot. Sometimes, if you're lucky, but the engagement, the relationship needs to be sustained. Because sometimes, even in track 2, when you start a new track 2 process, always at the beginning you have some trust issues because you don't know the other people. So, I remember some of the engagements I had for the first 1 or even 2 years. There's always this sort of, is he or she really trustworthy? All right? So You limit yourself, maybe you are not so open. You do self-censor. Then when times goes on and the relationship develops, trust building goes on, and then you feel like you are a team. And it is at that period that you start actually producing innovative and creative solutions. Whenever there is no trust issue in the room, that you don't see the other one as part of the other, that you see as a team lead, a team member. All right, so that team spirit is very important. You don't look at him as an Egyptian. You don't look at him as an Israeli. You don't look at him as a Turk or a Greek or a Turkish Cypriot or a Greek Cypriot, but as another fellow team member who is there out there for a collective problem solving. And it is at that period that you dress off all your biases and taboos and whatnot, and then you let your mind to work on a creative solution. And it's where you produce stuff. Sometimes the stuff that you produce remains there, shelved, archived, without making any policy impact. But sometimes they do. Are you familiar with Oslo Accords? The peace accords between Israelis and Palestinians. It started as a track 2 process. It didn't start as track 1. It started as a track 2 process that paved the way. It was the track 2 that paved the way to track 1. Okay, the track 1 didn't succeed, but nonetheless, that was the case. All right? How am I doing with time? Okay, I'm going to skip some of the stuff. There are some things that we can learn from successful stories or successful examples. There is, for example, just 2 or 3 years ago, maybe, a maritime border agreement between Israel and Lebanon. How many people heard about this? 2 countries who do not talk to one another. And you say, how come? Well, in that sense, there was another creative way. There was mediation by the Americans during the Biden administration. And the Israelis and the Lebanese, although they are at war with one another, they don't recognize one another, they don't talk to one another, they managed to delimit their maritime jurisdictions between themselves. Track 2 also played an important role there. All right? So, here you have an example where maritime issues, energy resource sharing, cultural exchange programs, environmental programs. These are areas, potential areas where track 2 can help to track 1 in solving their problems or create blueprints and whatnot. Just 2 months ago, I was in Innsbruck in a conference called the role of higher education, in peace building. And there I sort of toyed with the idea of how track 2 can be also exercised or can be also used in the higher education in peace building. So there are a lot of ideas out there. Track 2 complements official diplomacy, builds trust through informal channels, requires patience and commitment. I said that it needs sustained engagement. Ask yourselves, as actors in higher education, as students in higher education, are there ways that you can play a role in peaceful dialogue, promoting peaceful dialogue and peace building. Last slide. How can Track 2 initiatives be more effective? These are some questions that we ask ourselves. What role should social media play in unofficial diplomacy? How can we measure success in Track 2 diplomacy? Things which are usually taking place behind the radar, right? Behind closed doors. How do we, so this was also a big issue for me to even try to evaluate the very initiatives that I have been part of. It was very difficult for me to measure the success because these are happening in an unofficial platforms. So it's very difficult. What new challenges might Track 2 help address? Question mark. AI, climate crisis, I don't know. So with that, I'm going to leave you with these thoughts, and if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Yeah.
Thank you again for the conference. My question is, in what ways can Track 2 be used as a tool for conflict resolution in cases like Somalia and Mali, for example?
Now, you have to help me because I'm not very familiar with the cases in Mali and Somalia. But of course, first of all, you need to, if I start from scratch, you need to do an actor mapping. All right? That's usually how you start. Who are the actors who are important in that conflict? And then you ask yourself, what part of the conflict am I willing to contribute in the solution? What aspect of the problem? All right? Could be on education, it could be on border dispute, it could be on there is no dialogue between different conflicting groups, so each one is specific. You cannot just aim solving the whole thing. You have to look at it in an analytical way and take one chunk that you are aiming to solve. You might be bringing together teachers. You might be bringing together religious people. You might be bringing together armed groups. You might be bringing together, on the one side, the armed group, on the other side, some people who are close to government. Not Track 1, Track 2, but you want to make sure that what is taught there is going to be. So I think it is whenever Track 1 is not able to solve problems, there is always space for Track 2 to engage. But sometimes it is dangerous, by the way. So you have to also take those things into consideration. Because sometimes Track 1, governments do want the continuation of the conflict. So they are not very keen on others being engaged in the conflict. So they see sometimes Track 2 as a threat, Track 1, to the point that meeting of people to people, is sometimes illegal and can have very grave results. It might be life and death issue. Just an example. Lebanon and Israel. In Lebanon, it is the law. A Lebanese cannot talk to an Israeli. It is illegal. If somebody finds out, you go to jail. So, what do? I'll tell you what you do after we finish the camera. All right? All right. Okay, so there are ways of bringing people together and such. So whenever track 1 is not able, there is always a space is my short answer. Yeah?
My question is from your involvement in the track two diplomacy, especially in the Mediterranean, do you think energy has resulted to more conflict in the Mediterranean, or it has strengthened their diplomatic ties? Like, what role does energy play in the Mediterranean?
In general, this is an excellent question, by the way. In general, it hasn't, energy couldn't play its potential role to solve conflicts. In fact, it actually, in the Eastern Mediterranean, it added to the existing conflicts, more layers, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that it does not have the potential. All right? We asked these questions back in the early 2000s and 2010s when natural gas was discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean. Back then, if we managed to use cooperation on such issues, we would be much better off today. We could have been much better off today. But unfortunately, most of the countries in the region approach this situation from a very narrow, sovereignty-based orientation, saying that, oh, these are within the sovereignty of my state, so I don't negotiate such issues, all right? Which led to more competition and rise of tension rather than solving the problems. But, for example, when Israel and Lebanon, not directly, but indirectly, managed to solve their maritime boundary, Total played an important role. You know what Total is, right? The French oil and natural gas company. So it played a role like a go-in between Israelis and Lebanese when the two countries couldn't talk. So here you have a non-state actor, a business, who plays a positive role. All right? So if I'm just maybe too naive, but if we manage to find a way to join the resources in the Eastern Mediterranean, all these natural gas which have been discovered so far of Cyprus, Israel, and whatnot, Egypt, we know that one by one they don't have much of a value, but if somehow we were able to bring them together by some method, I don't know, pipeline or FLNG or whatever way, they would have had a bigger value, meaning that the small fields of Cyprus are not, what is the right word for, are not worthy? No, not worthy. What is it? Commerciable. Not commerciable by themselves. To be dug out because it's very expensive to do underwater drilling. But there are some fields which are close to them, also in Israel and whatnot. So suppose you connect them as one potential bigger source, which requires cooperation of the actors in the region, then you can utilize them. You know? I mean, come on. Look, we are living in Cyprus, where we know that there are some resources outside. Okay, they might be expensive to dig them out by themselves, but we still burn fuel oil to produce electricity. You know that, right? And it is very expensive here, right? But why not use the limited resources that was discovered for domestic purposes? But the Cypriots had this fantasy. We are going to take them out and we are going to export them, and we, the Cypriots, are becoming the new Dubai. That's bullshit, pardon my French. All right? But if you can use them domestically and feed them to the grid on both sides, and also place some solar panels, wind energy and whatnot, and also get connected to the other grids, be it Africa, be it Europe, you will be able to solve a lot of problems. So there are a lot of potential. It's free, sun, right? And we are wasting it. No? So energy, I believe, does have a potential if it is used properly. So far, it hasn't been. Yeah.
There is a asymmetrical difference between the parties. At this point, Georgia on stage.
Can you be more specific?
Like the cultural or economical asymmetrical difference.
Can you give me an example?
Lebanon and Israel,
Uh-huh.
there is some asymmetrical difference, and there are some parties.
I understand, yeah. Look, when it comes to social, society-related or social events, there will be very few times when you are going to get symmetrical relationship. So this is not physics. And you are not weighing the exact thing like, okay, 1 kilogram of this and 1 kilogram of that, so it's symmetrical. No. When you look at the actors, all the actors in the world, you don't really get a lot of symmetry. United States, okay. Who is the next symmetric to United States? Germany. Who is next to Germany? You get what I'm saying? So, between Israel and Lebanon, for example, you cannot get rid of the asymmetry. It's there. The power asymmetry is there. It's about finding the right balance of interests on both sides and finding the formula, be it mediation, be it facilitation, whatever method you are going to use to negotiate, to bring the win-win sort of sets which will entice each conflicting party to be willing to engage into meaningful negotiation. Otherwise, I mean, look, Israel and Lebanon, as I said, perfect example. Asymmetry is there, right? Who mediated? United States. Was United States neutral? God, no. Was it impartial? God, no. United States unconditionally supports Israel. We know that. But this is something else. United States, though an partial party, but nonetheless, it's an effective mediator. So they played a role of solving that specific problem, and they did it. So always trying to find the very neutral par excellence or impartial negotiator is also not possible. We had a lot of people who came to Cyprus in the last 50-something years, not mediators, but facilitators or advisors to Secretary General who tried to facilitate, and the guys were branded by either one side or at the end before they go by both sides. In a way, branded as persona non grata at the end of their tenure. So it's very difficult. All right? So.
First of all, thank you very much for this very interesting seminar. I'm very happy to notice the name Louise Diamond because I remember her from my childhood. Yet, when I see in retrospect, this term second track diplomacy came out in 1981 at the height of the Cold War,
Yeah.
the bipolar.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
how did it evolve to survive in this multipolar world? Did it change over time, you think?
Which multipolar world, by the way? Currently, no, there are lots of debates whether we are living in a multipolar world, by the way, or multiplex. Huh, Karim? No? There you go. Sure. Yeah, exam question. No. It survived, Burak, Hocam. A short answer, because track one has not been successful. Very clear in solving a lot of problems. Both bilateral as well as a lot of multilateral problems, including now the climate crisis, including the war in Ukraine, including what is happening in Gaza, war, genocide, whatever you call it yourselves, all right? If they are still there, that means that, or Syria, look at the whole situation in Syria, or Sudan or Mali. So the problems are there. So we do need other methodologies other than track one. Call it something else. Call it track X, or call it, I don't know, Zombo. I just invented this. But you need something that you can use in order to contribute to at least creating the right ideas and policy recommendations that track one, hopefully one day, when they have the political will, that they can use and they don't start from scratch. So this is the beauty of track two, by the way, that they produce ideas, meaning that whenever track one, the right leaders, the right political configurations come to power, or come to the conclusion that, yes, we need to solve this, that they don't start from scratch. That there are something already cooked which they can use as such, or which they can maybe modify a little bit and they use it. So it's like, yeah, I'm hungry. Okay, yeah, let's cook. What do we cook? Do we have electricity? Do we have water? Do we have meat? Do we have sauce and what? No. Are you hungry? Yes, we have pre-cooked meal here. Track two. Products of track two. Karim?
I have four questions. So you talked about track one. So you have the pre-cooked meal, put it in the microwave, you're good, okay?
I hate microwave, but
Okay, we put it in the oven, whatever method. So take the example of Oslo Accord. You have, up to a point, you have a relatively correct configuration, Rabin in Israel, Arafat in Palestine, and Clinton in the US. Okay, so, but then that ended up breaking down. So my question would be, what do we do when, as track two, for example, negotiators, facilitators, whatever, what do we do when we hand to track one begins, continues on what we built on, and then breaks down?
great question. I don't know. I mean, there is no one fits for all. It depends on the situation. And let's put it this way, track two is not like track one. I mean, who am I, for God's sakes? Just a lousy professor. How much influence do I have to take that pre-cooked meal and sort of bring it to the attention of the whole country? So track two, in that sense, has very limited influence. One thing that you can do is you be more vocal. Take things to public debate. This is one thing that you can do. If it is not very sensitive and if it's not whatever, then as a private citizen or as a group, you can take things into public debate, like TV programs or social media. Of course, depending on the country. Sometimes in some countries, the mainstream media is controlled by some actors who might not give you the camera. And what do? You take a YouTube video. Okay, how many people are going to watch you and what's going to be your impact? Yeah.
I wanted to ask, is this kind of, this idea or this concept of tracking, is it talk of a more general kind of trend towards like an increasing influence of non-states? Where traditionally you have the kind of state-to-state relations, but now you're discussing this idea of the relevancy of non-state approaches. Is this talking about a more general kind of trend of an increasing relevance of non-state?
Absolutely. No, track 2 is definitely increasing. And yes, non-state actors in this very globalized world, though, okay, we have Trump now who is very anti-globalist. I don't know what that means, but like it or not, we are living in a much more interconnected world, all right? And in that interconnected world, states are not the only actors. We do have other actors, non-state actors, who are very relevant, and it is only normal that their engagement, their interconnectedness will be naturally increased. And it has to be like that. Because at the end of the day, guys, track 2 also brings the expertise and the technical know-how, which track 1 doesn't have. So in that sense, of course, you need the blueprints, the policy recommendations and whatnot of the people who are the technical experts of their own subject. Yeah. Boris?
Hocam, I would like to go back to this wheel of multi-track
Yeah.
policy. And then I'd like to ask one more conceptual or theoretical question. Is there a kind of hierarchical relationship between these tracks? And beyond that, can we skip one and then go to the other one? Maybe that's why they didn't do it linear indeed, circular. But and like following that, what about the tracks that's existing in the negotiation process regarding the Cyprus conflict? You gave some examples, but more than that, if we revisit each single track, where we are.
Look, I mean, conceptually, these were created by Louis Diamond and Ambassador MacDonald 30-something years ago. Just to give you a conceptual lens, to give you a systemic approach to solving conflicts. This is just one system that they produced. That doesn't mean that this is God's words, all right? I don't think that they meant there is any hierarchy among them. It depends from country to country.
In practice, maybe, or observation.
The thing is, each one is not, in my opinion, of equal weight, I would say. Again, it changes from country to country. For example, religion. Does religion play an important role in every conflict? If you ask Cyprus, does it play a big role? For some people, yes. For some people, it doesn't. Just to show you, this guy, his name is Shakir Alemdar. He's the Imam of Hala Sultan Mosque in Larnaca. He's my classmate. We chose different paths, to put it that way. But look, I talked with him so many times, and he told me very specifically that religion never played a spoiler role in Cyprus, never became the source of conflict in the Cyprus conflict. For how many years? Muslims and Christian Orthodox lived side by side or mixed, let's say, in a very friendly way. That it hasn't been a... But in some conflicts, it is a source of conflict. In Cyprus, going back to these, we have a problem here, definitely, on both sides. We don't have any problem here. by the way. We do have a lot of conflict resolution experts on both sides. Thanks to Louis Diamond and Ambassador MacDonald and many others, Benjamin Broom and whatnot, who came to Cyprus in the 80s and gave trainings to people like myself and many others, all right? With private citizens, especially after the opening of the checkpoints, things are becoming much more, how shall I put it, neutral and normal. There is a level of civility. People cross without any big incident happening between the two communities. So in that sense, I don't see problem there. So if I were to bet, and again, peace activism, it's problematic in the sense that, I mean, civil society related, maybe I shouldn't just narrow it down to peace activism, but specifically on Cyprus, there is a big asymmetry. The civil society in the north, there is an independent civil society, independent of the political parties. There's space for them, like the teachers' unions and whatnot. So, and they are very active also, given peace activism. But in the south, among the Greek Cypriot community, the civil society is not so independent. The political parties occupy almost the whole political space in the south. So there is a level of, I mean, remember, well, you don't remember maybe, I was talking about the Annan Plan in 2004 and all the street demonstrations where 50, 60,000 Turkish Cypriots were marching in the streets. Like 1/3 of the population at that time. That's huge. That never took place in the Greek Cypriot side. All right? So when it comes to peace activism, we have problems. And of course, research and training, the education thing, is definitely a problem in Cyprus. And especially, again, in the Greek Cypriot side, because they didn't change their textbooks, history textbooks, which are quite nationalist and conservative, doesn't really preach for peace. So I'm not saying we are all saints in the north, okay? But there was a trial, they changed at one point the history textbook then, they changed it not to the back, but somewhere in between. But on both sides, textbooks lack stuff like consociational democracy, like power sharing, federative models. People do not know these things. And it's ironic that since the 70s, and it's been how many years? 50 years, we have been trying to establish a federal Cyprus as a solution. How do you reach to a federal Cyprus without teaching what a federation entails to your students, kids? And it's okay that if somebody has a different religion, if somebody has a different language, if somebody has a different skin color, it's okay. We have to share power, and it's normal. This is not taught in schools. So definitely there, track 5, we have a lot to do. So depending on every conflict, it can. Yeah.
But John, what happens when track 1 and track 2 is a clash between both tracks? What happens?
Usually what happens, it's bad news for track 2. I was blamed as a traitor. Yeah, I mean, go back to some of the newspapers in the 90s. Yeah, Ahmet Sözen the traitor. But what happens? You're marginalized, and in some countries or in some conflicts, it's life-threatening. People get threats, depending on the level of conflict and whatnot. Here I was lucky in the sense that I got branded as a traitor, and that's it. I haven't. Yeah, some threats, emails, and whatnot, but nothing really that I was physically hurt. Nothing happened so far. But that happens, yeah. Absolutely. It's not track one who is going to get hurt. It's track, because track one, talking about Max Weber, who has the legitimate monopoly of violence? The state, track one. I don't have that kind of power. Okay. Ready to go? Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and we'll see you in the next event. All the best.